everything that's going on in the world of sports and how Butt Fumble Sports sees it. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us on all of our channels at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. And of course, make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, where you can get all of our blogs, all of our content, as well as a weekly newsletter with all of our picks that comes out every Friday. Make sure you sign up for that free newsletter. Throughout our show, we will go through what's going on in the NFL as we inch closer to the Super Bowl, what's going on in the NBA as we get closer to the trade deadline, college basketball and the latest AP poll, what the rankings mean for college basketball fans, and of course, Major League Baseball as we get ever closer to spring training as pitchers and catchers report. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you engage with us on all of our channels. We love to hear from all of you. To open things, let's start with Super Bowl headlines as we get closer to the Super Bowl between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Of all the storylines in this Super Bowl, the one that stands out to me the most is the two quarterbacks and their road to this game. While many people will obviously talk about this being the first Super Bowl between two African-American quarterbacks, that is less of a storyline for me, obviously, long overdue, should have happened years ago. But to me, it's more the story of a quarterback that was destined to be in this place and one that was often doubted. Patrick Mahomes, the son of a major league pitcher, had an arm that everyone talked about, whether he was going to be a pro baseball player or a pro football player. He was destined for greatness. Jalen Hurts was doubted throughout his time in college, was considered maybe too high a draft pick in the NFL, and obviously, once he got his opportunity, there were many who thought he would just turn into a running quarterback. But this game between Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts is very much between a destined player and one that had to go through the determination and the evolution as a player to ultimately reach this point. Jalen Hurts, if you haven't paid attention this year, has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And while his touchdowns on the ground get plenty of attention, through the air he's been dynamic as well. He has the fourth highest QBR in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes being number 2. But this is a battle between two great quarterbacks, and while the cultural importance obviously is there, to me, statistically and in terms of development, this is a great story. Now, Jalen Hurts will have more pressure on him in many ways because expectations, they lean towards Patrick Mahomes. We believe Mahomes is going to have a big game through the air and that he's going to be the more outstanding player. But watch out for Jalen Hurts. If you believe that the Philadelphia Eagles are ultimately going to win the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts as an MVP bet is a good one to make. Obviously, the quarterback is a popular play for Super Bowl MVP of the winning team no matter what. But if the Eagles are going to win, Jalen Hurts is going to have to be the one that gets them there. He has the passing capability with the receivers, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. He has the ability to challenge this Chiefs secondary, which is not one of the better passing defenses in the NFL. And of course, when Jalen Hurts gets inside the red zone, gets close to the goal line, he's absolutely a threat to score touchdowns. So Jalen Hurts as Super Bowl MVP may be a bet worth making. Another storyline for this Super Bowl that stands out to me is the road Andy Reid had to take to get to this year's Super Bowl. Obviously, this is the Andy Reid Super Bowl between the Eagles and the Chiefs, but so much of this has to do with what Andy Reid built in Philadelphia and ultimately then what he had to duplicate or rebuild in Kansas City. People often are going to talk about the Donovan McNabb years as a failed time. 4 NFC championships in a row, only 1 Super Bowl appearance, and of course, no Super Bowl wins for Andy Reid. But his time in Philadelphia was far more successful because it made the Eagles a competitive force year in, year out, and that really challenged the modern ownership of the Eagles to remain that competitive moving forward. So a lot of what we've seen in years after Andy Reid, while it hasn't been as successful, obviously the Doug Peterson years were, but Andy Reid built the foundation for what the modern Eagles ultimately became. And a lot of credit has to go to Donovan McNabb. People aren't going to talk about him nearly as much as they will Andy Reid. But Donovan McNabb and Andy Reid had a special relationship. They built a winning culture in Philadelphia. And now Andy Reid, in moving on, obviously he was fired from Philadelphia, moved on to the Kansas City Chiefs and brought not only a winning culture, but found another quarterback that can play within his system incredibly well. Donovan McNabb may not be as athletic as Patrick Mahomes, but they have a lot of similarities. Their ability to work outside of the script, work outside of the pocket, make big arm throws. A lot of people forget just how big an arm Donovan McNabb had. Obviously nothing like Patrick Mahomes, but both can scramble, both can move. So Andy Reid built something similar in Kansas City, but just found one of the greatest all time to do it. But Andy Reid's road from Philadelphia ultimately to Kansas City is a great story because it speaks to, if a coach fails in one city, we shouldn't automatically label them a loser. Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, these are two coaches that made playoffs when they were with a first franchise in their first coaching job, ultimately didn't win a Super Bowl, were fired, and it was their second spot that ended up being even more successful. So for all those fans out there of NFL teams that are looking to hire new coaches or just have, maybe you're getting the best of this guy in their second job. Or maybe it takes a little while for them to ultimately reach that status of an Andy Reid or a Bill Belichick, obviously those being two of the greatest coaches of all time. One note for you, and this goes to something we'll talk about a little later in NFL news. There has been no head coach that's ever won a Super Bowl with two different organizations. Maybe Kansas City Chiefs fans rather should be happy that Andy Reid never won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. That stat wouldn't hold up. But in another storyline, moving away from Andy Reid and how the Eagles did build after they fired him, Howie Roseman and the roster that he's built over his tenure with the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, there was a time where he stepped away as GM as Chip Kelly took over. But Howie Roseman has built now two Super Bowl contending rosters, one that won a Super Bowl under Doug Peterson, and now one that's competing in another Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. And what he's done has been outstandingly brilliant, and he's done it in all three ways. He's gone through the draft, he's gone through free agency, and he's also made some big-time trades. He's traded with the Saints to get some help in the secondary. He traded with the Titans to get a star wide receiver. And of course, he went into the draft and he found as many Georgia Bulldogs as possible on the defensive side of the ball. He just built an amazing team. The offensive line for the Eagles is one of the best in the NFL. The defensive line is one of the best in the NFL. The linebackers got a lot better by the addition of Hassan Reddick. The secondary, as I mentioned, added pieces throughout the season and the preseason. And of course, the offense was complemented by the selection and development of Jalen Hurts. Howie Roseman should get so much credit for what he's done in the last few years, and he did it without a head coach with any brand name or any reputation. Nick Sirianni is someone who clearly came in to the perfect situation, was handed an amazing team, and all he has to do is not screw it up. So rather than praise Nick Sirianni too much, I'd rather put Howie Roseman under the spotlight and commend him for what he's done. And too often in pro football especially, we only talk about the draft or we only talk about free agency. Howie Roseman has done everything a general manager could to make this roster better. Not just one phase of the team, offense, special teams, defense, not just one position. He has addressed the entire roster constantly, and I don't think we can say that actually about too many general managers in the NFL, Kansas City Chiefs included. Did the Chiefs ever really address the hole in the secondary when they didn't re-sign Tyrann Mathieu? Not really, and their secondary is still suspect, one of the reasons why I lean towards the Eagles in this Super Bowl. But rather on the other side, Philadelphia, in every possible way, has built a winning roster, 53 men deep. They even added to this team mid-season with Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. It just speaks to how Howie Roseman right now is the best executive in the NFL. The last Super Bowl storyline that I want to hit on is the brotherly love that we'll see in this Super Bowl between the Kelce brothers. Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce. They have a great podcast. If you like podcasts, New Heights, unbelievable. They're not just entertaining. These are two outstanding football players. Jason Kelce may be the best center in the NFL. Meanwhile, Travis Kelce might be one of the best tight ends of all time. The ability of one family to reach these heights is phenomenal. We have seen two brothers play in the same Super Bowl, obviously the McCourty brothers, but we've never seen two brothers play against each other. It will certainly be a crazy game for the parents of those two. But for me, what I like so much about this is there's no animosity. These are two brothers that love talking football, that love each other, that love engaging with each other. It sets a completely different tone for the Super Bowl in which whoever wins, the other will be there immediately after to give them a hug. I love what I'm seeing from the two of them. First of all, if Jason Kelce does retire at the end of this year with 2 Super Bowls, he automatically will go into media and be a smashing success. Jason Kelce was made to be on TV. He's going to be brilliant. Travis Kelce as well. But Travis Kelce right now is building one of the greatest postseason stat lines of all time. He's now surpassed Julian Edelman in receiving yards in the postseason with only Jerry Rice ahead of him. Travis Kelce could truly put himself amongst the best of all time, not just at tight end, but at the receiving position, wide receiver, tight end, and running back. Special things that could go down in the Super Bowl, some of the storylines that I'm obviously looking forward to in the next few days. Make sure you're following us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter, as well as check out our website, buttfumblesports.com. That way you get all of our Super Bowl content. We'll be putting out picks later this week, so make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. Sign up for the free newsletter. In that newsletter, you'll get all of our picks all in one place, and whether you agree with us or you want to go in another direction, we do the research so you get smarter. That way you make good picks on Super Bowl Sunday. Speaking of early betting lines for the Super Bowl, right now the Philadelphia Eagles are 1.5-point favorites. The over-under is set at 50.5 points where I see it. I really like the Eagles in this game. I know that the Madden Super Bowl simulation came out earlier today and awarded the Eagles a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, that Madden simulation is just 1-4 in the last 5 Super Bowls it's predicted. But I really like the Eagles for exactly the reason I mentioned a moment ago, which is the roster and the depth. There isn't a weakness on this team, whether it's in the trenches, whether it's at the linebacker position, whether it's in the secondary, the wide receivers, the running back, the tight end, the quarterback, even the coaching staff. Everything about the Eagles screams complete team. And often we talk about that a defense wins Super Bowls. Not only does a defense win a Super Bowl, but depth. Depth makes such a massive difference in a Super Bowl, and we're seeing how the Chiefs are being challenged, whether it's at wide receiver or other positions. They're not deep enough. My concern is Patrick Mahomes may be the most brilliant player on the field in the Super Bowl, but ultimately the Eagles are the better team. And my expectation is the better team will ultimately win the Super Bowl. So I do have the Eagles winning. I do like the Eagles to cover -1.5. That line has moved down as we've gotten closer to the game, has moved more in favor of the Chiefs. More people are starting to bet on the Chiefs. So I like the Eagles -1.5. I would buy 1.5, and I'd probably take Chiefs to cover +3, just so I'm securing a little bit of insurance in case Patrick Mahomes makes me look foolish. I don't expect the Eagles to blow out the Chiefs, so I do expect it to be a 3-4 point game. I really would like actually to see more money placed on the Eagles as we get closer to kickoff. That gives me a better opportunity to bet on the Chiefs to cover. But for now, I do like the Eagles on the money line, Eagles -1.5. And for now, I am leaning towards the under. I think this game is going to have a lot of yards. My question is, will it have enough points? Asking these two teams to each get 25 points, I think that may be a little too high. I really like a 24-20 game, maybe even 24-23, but I don't see this game getting to a place where both teams are scoring 25 points. So I'm going to lean towards the under for now. I feel good about Mahomes' ankle. I don't think that's going to play a factor. I feel good about Jalen Hurts' shoulder. I don't think that's going to play a factor. I actually think that the Eagles' defense will be better than people think, and I think the Chiefs are going to rely more on their running game than people expect. Isaiah Pacheco is going to play a massive role in this game. The Eagles are really good against the pass. They're not good against the run. What should the Chiefs try to attack is the running defense of the Eagles. That's going to keep the clock running. I lean towards the under for a number of reasons. But again, Eagles money line, Eagles -1.5, and under 50.5 points. That's what Butt Fumble Sports has for the Super Bowl. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. We love engaging with the audience, so if you have rants, takes, or want to get more of our picks, make sure you engage with us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, check out our website, buttfumblesports.com. Go there and sign up for the free newsletter. That newsletter comes out every Friday morning with all of our game notes and gambling trends for the weekend, whether it's college basketball, NBA, or like this weekend, the Super Bowl. So make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, and sign up for the free newsletter today. Shifting gears from the NFL and going into the NBA, we have a three-pointer from the NBA as we go through the three major events that have occurred in the NBA. So to shift gears from the NFL to the NBA, let's do our NBA three-pointer, the three major things going down in the association. Number one, the impact of the Kyrie Irving trade. A couple of days ago, the Brooklyn Nets dealt Kyrie Irving to the Dallas Mavericks in a move that many expected. Kyrie Irving had requested a trade last week. Clearly, what was going on with him and the Brooklyn Nets wasn't working. The Nets wanted to get out of that as Kyrie is in a walk year. He's going to be a free agent in the offseason. So with that said, Nets did as good as they could do. They had the opportunity to shop Kyrie around to a number of different teams. We're now getting words of what some of the offers were, or at least what some of the asking prices were for the Nets. They wanted Fred VanVleet from the Raptors. They didn't like the Russell Westbrook exchange from the Lakers. But ultimately, it was the deal that they got from the Dallas Mavericks that they approved. Spencer Dinwiddie going to the Dallas Mavericks, as well as Dorian Finney-Smith. I think that the Nets got the better of this deal. Two players that they can slot into the lineup immediately when Kevin Durant returns. Whether this team is actually going to go anywhere in the postseason, I have my doubts. But the Nets will at least be a bit more competitive than they were before, given you didn't know what you were going to get from Kyrie day in, day out. I understand Kyrie is the most talented player in the deal. Kyrie absolutely was the best player, and giving him up for lesser talent usually isn't a benefit. But the fact that you got picks, you got players that you can slot in with Kevin Durant, and maybe even more importantly, the Nets moving on from Kyrie Irving, that's a benefit for the franchise. Kyrie Irving and the circus that he brought have been a disaster over his last few years in Brooklyn. So I think the Nets got the better of the deal in that they got players, they got picks, and ultimately they're going to get peace of mind because they don't have to deal with the craziness of Kyrie Irving. On the other side, the Dallas Mavericks have some real question marks around them. They lose their depth on their starting lineup. They now have two ball-dominant guards that are going to want to control everything in Doncic or in Kyrie. Whether you have Doncic as a point forward or as a point guard, it doesn't matter. He owns the ball for a majority of the time he's on the floor. Kyrie Irving is not a wait for a pass and shoot kind of guy. He wants to dominate with the dribble as well. So I don't really understand how these two guys are going to play along with each other. To me, it's almost like having two great centers in the NHL. You want them on line one and line two, but you don't have that situation in Dallas. Like a Steph Curry and a Jordan Poole. This is one where both players are obviously going to play together. They're going to be on the floor together in clutch moments. Who's going to take the last shot? We all assume it's going to be Luka, but can we assume that Kyrie is going to be okay with that? Also, can we assume Kyrie is not going to create problems or headaches? At this point, I feel like we can't go a 4-week period of time without Kyrie Irving literally doing something that shocks the NBA. Whether it's anti-Semitic comments or refusing to play or needing time off because of political unrest in the country, I don't know how Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks are going to literally be able to weather the storm that he inevitably brings. I think Kyrie Irving is one of the most talented point guards, especially when it comes to the dribble and getting to the basket, that we've ever seen in the association, but that's not important anymore. Availability matters. Working and playing with teammates matter. Being consistent, not just in the stat or in the box score, but obviously also just on the floor in terms of leadership. I don't know what the Dallas Mavericks just traded for. They lose depth, they lose picks. Sure, if Kyrie walks in the offseason, it opens up cap space for them to maybe find some guys in free agency to build around Luka Doncic. But I felt like Mark Cuban took a bit of a gamble here, and I don't think it's going to pay off. Some people are making some really lofty comments about the Dallas Mavericks, like somehow they're going to make the NBA Finals now. I don't see that at all. They'd be lucky to get past the first round of the playoffs. I ultimately think they will because I think Luka is that good a player that he'll literally will them to the second round. But if I put them up against the Memphis Grizzlies right now, I would take the Grizzlies. There are a number of other teams in the West in which I think actually Kyrie could be a detriment to the Mavericks. He's bad on defense. He's a ball hog. He's going to drain the ball away from Luka Doncic. So for a number of reasons, I think this is a bad move for the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, time will tell, but given the history of Kyrie Irving, the cancer that is Kyrie has now infested the Dallas Mavericks. We'll see how long it takes them to ultimately become sick. The second of our three-pointer going into major news in the NBA Association is the trade deadline drama. Obviously, once Kyrie got traded, it set off a firestorm, whether it's with Woj bombs or with Shams or anybody else. Everyone's waiting to know who is going to be the next big name dealt. We've heard about Chris Paul being offered in trades. Russell Westbrook's been on the trade block for I don't know how many months at this point. The Lakers would do anything to move on from him. And now that the Nets have traded Kyrie, there is some rumblings about Kevin Durant. Stephen A. Smith made some news on Monday suggesting that the Boston Celtics were asking about Kevin Durant in exchange for Jaylen Brown. I think that's crazy. I think that's bizarre. I think Stephen A. Smith is fishing there. Even if he's heard something, I can't see any scenario in which the Boston Celtics would move on from a 25-year-old Jaylen Brown having an all-star caliber season for a 34-year-old Kevin Durant who's on the sidelines with injury. So that makes no sense to me. I don't think the Brooklyn Nets are going to move on from Kevin Durant for a number of reasons. One, it's hard to get a superstar in this league. They've already traded one. They've really traded two in James Harden last year, Kyrie this year. I can't see the Brooklyn Nets trading Kevin Durant right now. And secondarily, I think they still want to build around Kevin Durant. I still think they believe that with Kevin Durant in the right pieces, they can compete in an East that other than the Boston Celtics, there are a lot of question marks. There are teams in the East that have an ultimate superstar. Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo. If you want to call Jimmy Butler a superstar, fine. But all of those same teams, they really lack a number two guy in that Jordan Pippen kind of way. The Celtics are the only team that really have that, because I'm not putting James Harden there quite yet. I know he's had a good regular season, but I need to see it in the postseason to feel differently. If Chris Middleton gets healthier, there's a 1-2 punch. But given that the Brooklyn Nets already have a superstar and are just one away from, again, being able to contend in the East, I don't know why Brooklyn would move on from Kevin Durant. I think Durant is going to stay in Brooklyn. I think they've already gone through the trade rumors around him earlier in the summer. If they wanted to make a deal, that would have been the time to do it. I think Durant's going to remain in Brooklyn. As for other names that have been mentioned on the trade deadline, I think the Lakers would do anything to move on from Russell Westbrook. But if a team really wanted him, or if there was a trade to be made, I feel like it would have occurred already. The fact that he's been out there this long and no one's gone after him, it just says a lot about Russell, where Russell Westbrook is in his career. He's almost in that Carmelo Anthony, Isaiah Thomas place of, could he continue to play and put up numbers? Sure, but I think most franchises are actually ready to move on from him and kind of retire him. I think Russell Westbrook at this point, his best basketball is far behind him, and for a number of reasons, I think that he's going to remain a Laker until ultimately either his contract expires or they cut him in the offseason. But Russell Westbrook in a trade, I just don't see any team willing to make that move. The last name, and I mentioned it a moment ago, Chris Paul. Interesting that the Suns looking to make a move. They're going to have a new owner. Their new owner takes over this week. And always with a new owner comes a lot of moves, whether in trades or free agency. It seems like Chris Paul's days in Phoenix are winding down to an end. Whether they can make a move before the trade deadline or not, I'm skeptical about that. But don't be surprised if his name is mentioned quite a bit right up until Thursday's trade deadline. Now let's go through everything else going on in the association outside of those. And our last NBA three-pointer of the night is LeBron and the scoring record. And this has nothing to do with him breaking it. This has more to do with the importance of this record and how overblown it's become in the last few weeks. ESPN, TNT, and all of the media outlets that have a vested interest in the NBA are trying to hype up this record, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's scoring record. I would challenge anyone out there listening or watching right now, tell me, what number is the NBA scoring record? I'll wait. Give me the number. Can you even put it into the hundreds or into the thousands? The fact that we really don't know this record, and American sports fans are very aware of major numbers in sports. Whether it's touchdowns, whether it's home runs, whether it's wins, we're very aware. We followed the Golden State Warriors when they chased the Bulls' win record for a single season. We obviously watched Aaron Judge chase after Roger Maris and the American League record in home runs. That wasn't even the Major League Baseball record. When it was the Major League Baseball record in the late 90s, that was something that was breaking news every day between McGuire and Sosa and Griffey. We're not following this record around LeBron James like the NBA zealots are. For the most part, America is enjoying the fact that the NBA is giving us some entertaining basketball, but LeBron James and the Lakers at this point are on TV way too often. They're on national TV because he's chasing this record. The moment this record is broken, I'll be very happy to get two competitive teams in those TNT primetime games, because I've had enough of the Lakers. They may be fighting for a playoff spot, but they've taken up way too much time on television over the last couple of weeks. And as for LeBron James breaking this record, does it put him anywhere else does it change the argument around his legacy? Not at all. Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. LeBron James may be the most athletic, he may be the most physically gifted, but there's no way anyone will ever convince me that Michael Jordan wasn't the best basketball player of all time. Just look at his success, look at how he played, and look at the era he played in. LeBron James's longevity should be applauded, his physical endurance. He's a physical specimen. He is brilliantly talented. I'm not taking anything away from him, but just because he passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in total points scored, that doesn't change the narrative for me at all. It actually confirms some things. He is gifted. He has longevity on his side. He's played with a lot of gifted, great teams. Nothing against that. All reasons to praise him. But for me, Michael Jordan is the GOAT, and I feel like we've lost perspective on what really matters. Points don't matter in the NBA. Points don't matter. Championships matter. Wins matter. The reason I say points don't matter, if I told you NBA games in the 90s were 86 to 79, that would sound ludicrous today, now that we're getting 130 to 123 point games. But the game was more engaging, more competitive in previous decades. So I don't want to take away from LeBron by saying he plays in a soft decade. He doesn't. It's still competitive. It's still physical. But scoring has absolutely swelled. For the same reason that when we compare Dan Marino and Matthew Stafford, we should be aware of the context of the era they played in. Dan Marino played in a running back era, in an era where passing wasn't as prevalent. Matthew Stafford played in an era where passing yards were abundant and scoring was abundant. So even though Matthew Stafford is ultimately probably going to have stats that either are similar or even potentially eclipse Dan Marino, that doesn't mean Matthew Stafford was a better quarterback. Now, LeBron James is either the second or third best player in NBA history. I'm willing to give him that. But to ever say that he deserves that number one slot over Michael Jordan, it doesn't change until he gets a sixth ring. The moment he gets a sixth ring, then scoring records matter. But until then, it's Michael Jordan for me. Now, let's check out everything else that's going around the association. Here are a few things that stood out outside of our three-pointers that I wanted to make note of. With Golden State trying to figure out how to fill the void with Steph Curry injured, this is Jordan Poole's moment. We flash back to the beginning of the season, preseason, when Jordan Poole and Draymond Green got in that fight. It was big news. It had a lot of people talking, but ultimately, Jordan Poole definitely proved something over the last few months that he isn't going to... Jordan Poole proved over the last few months that he can insert himself into the starting lineup and be a productive member of the Golden State Warriors. I think this time without Steph Curry is really going to be a positive for him. I think it's going to give him an opportunity to prove his value. He signed that contract in the offseason. Warriors have invested money in him. I really like what he can do on the floor when he gets the opportunity. And now he doesn't have to split time with Steph Curry. So for that reason alone, I think this is Jordan Poole's moment. Steph Curry being out for a few weeks obviously isn't good for the Golden State Warriors' chances of trying to get into the playoffs, but I think this is a great opportunity for Jordan Poole to prove his importance to Golden State. The next thing that stood out to me around the association is how Jokic continues to just be the best basketball player in the world. I know he's won back-to-back MVPs, but for many reasons, he deserves a third. His passing, scoring, his defense, everything. He's the best player. I know Giannis has been great. I know Jason Tatum and Joel Embiid and Luka Doncic are having wonderful seasons, but Jokic deserves his third MVP in a row. One thing I do want to call out, of the players I just mentioned, Jokic, Giannis, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, and Jason Tatum, only one of them is American-born. That tells you so much about where the NBA is right now. Yes, Jokic is the best player in the world, but it really is Jokic against the world. The globalization of the NBA really standing out over the last few years, as whether it's Giannis in Milwaukee, Jokic in Denver, or Luka in Dallas, obviously Joel Embiid in Philadelphia. The globalization of the game is bringing up the talent level everywhere, and it's good for the game of basketball, both abroad but also domestically. The NBA is truly international now, because when I just mentioned the top 5 MVP candidates and only one of them is from America, that tells you all you need to know about what David Stern built, what the Dream Team of 1992, their impact on the game. These are signs that all of that progress and the evolution of the NBA across the global sports world, the impact that it's had. But for me, again, going back to where I started, Jokic is the MVP for me, no doubt about it. I'd give him the award right now. The last thing I want to touch on as we go through everything around the association is the Celtics ending the Kyrie Nets. And they did this in 2 different ways. One, obviously, in last year's playoffs as the Celtics swept the Nets and ended their season. But also this year, last week, I had the pleasure on Wednesday of going to the Nets-Celtics game in Boston, and I saw one of the most brilliant basketball games I've ever seen by one team. The Boston Celtics blew out the Nets. It was a dominant performance. They went 8 of 8 from 3 to start the game. Unbelievable. And that was actually really the last game of the Kyrie Nets. After that, Kyrie asked for his trade and ultimately was traded a few days later. And it must be so sweet for Boston Celtic fans, as well as for members of that organization, to know that they were behind Kyrie Irving ultimately leaving the Brooklyn Nets. I know that one game probably isn't the reason, but the fact that that blowout happened when it did, the trade request came when it did, and he got moved when he was, it speaks to how the Boston Celtics, they got their bit of revenge. They moved on from Kyrie. Obviously, the Kyrie experiment didn't work out for them as well, but ultimately, they made the moves to stay competitive, get back to the NBA Finals, and for so many reasons, the Celtics are in a better place now than they were with Kyrie Irving on their roster. So the Kyrie experiment fails in Brooklyn, and in large part, thanks to the Boston Celtics getting their revenge. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. And of course, go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. Sign up for our free newsletter that comes out every Friday morning with all of our game notes and gambling trends for all of the college basketball, NBA, and Super Bowl that come on the weekends. So make sure you follow us on all of our channels and sign up for that free newsletter on our website, buttfumblesports.com. Now let's go back to college and talk some college basketball. This past Saturday saw more upsets of teams in the top 25 than anywhere at any time in the AP polls history. So a lot of movement. But the conference I want to talk about first, the conference of conversation, is the Big 12 Conference. Right now, the Big 12 Conference has 6 of its 10 teams ranked. A number of great teams, Texas being one of them. Kansas has been struggling, but Kansas State has played well. TCU, a number of teams that really are teams to look out for in March. College basketball in the Big 12 is something to look out for. I think they're going to get at least 6 teams into the tournament, obviously, maybe even 7 or 8. Given that they only have 10 teams in the conference, what a statement for the Big 12. Ultimately, I actually could see one of those teams winning a national championship. So keep your eye on the Big 12. They've been trending in the right direction. As for the team of the week, it goes to the St. Mary's Gales. They ranked 15th in the latest AP poll after beating the rival Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference. They beat Gonzaga on Saturday, 78-70 at home. For the St. Mary's Gales, they've oftentimes been the little brother to Gonzaga. A truly big win for them, beating a Zags team that isn't as good as maybe was projected earlier in the year. This sets St. Mary's up to potentially be a number 4 seed in the March Madness bracket. Great opportunity for them. They don't have too many tests left on their schedule, so an opportunity for them to secure a 3 or 4 seed if they win out the remainder of the year. The big man on campus I want to talk about, Indiana University's Trayce Jackson-Davis. Indiana had a big matchup against Purdue on Saturday and came out the victor in a 79-74 win on Saturday. Trayce Jackson-Davis has been outstanding throughout the year. He's recorded at least double-digit points in every game he's played this year. Oftentimes it's been a double-double. He now is the all-time record holder in blocks in Indiana basketball history. But what stood out to me for TJD was his performance against Purdue, and specifically against Zach Edey, who is the best player in college basketball by head and shoulders, both literally and statistically. But Trayce Jackson-Davis, 25 points, 7 rebounds, 5 blocks against Purdue, and that was at home in a pressure game against the best player in the country. It speaks to the fact that Trayce Jackson-Davis, his return to Indiana was justified, but when he ultimately moves on to the NBA, he will be successful there. Not a doubt about it in my mind. Trayce Jackson-Davis has stood out as one of the best Hoosiers in the past 5 years. What he can do for this Indiana roster, they've now moved into the top 20 in the AP poll rankings. Really excited about what I'm seeing from the Hoosiers. Again, they could secure a number 4 seed. What that means for Mike Woodson and that Indiana program, obviously they're not going to win the Big Ten. I think Purdue's ultimately going to secure that. But I really do like what Indiana's doing, trending up. Big win against the number 1 team in the country and rival, Purdue. As we continue to look at college basketball, the next thing I want to talk about is which team is trending up. That is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They're ranked 24th in the latest AP poll. They play against Indiana on Tuesday night. They beat Indiana earlier this year at the RAC at Rutgers. But that said, Rutgers is a team that most people around the country, most college basketball fans, wouldn't expect to be in the top 25, but they've been competitive all year. They've been either the number 2 or number 3 team in the Big Ten standings now for the past few weeks. So for a number of reasons, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, they continue to hang around in the rankings. They're trending up in the right direction for me. I think they're not only going to be a team to watch in March, but they actually could make it to the second weekend of the tournament. The team that's trending down for me is Kansas State. Obviously, they're still ranked. They're ranked 12th. They fell 5 spots in the AP poll that came out on Monday. But their most recent loss to Texas on Saturday at home, really disappointing. The Octagon of Doom usually is a sure win for the K-State Wildcats. And the fact that they lost to an in-conference rival that if they had any chance of winning the conference, they had to beat, really disappointing for me. I think it does expose Kansas State a little bit. They're not a team that plays nearly as well on the road. So the fact that they lost at home to a competitive rival team does have a bit of concern, reason for concern for me. So K-State is my team that's trending down this week. And finally, the last thing, our Remember for March comment for the week. Zach Edey, Purdue's big man, is absolutely unstoppable. Even though Purdue lost to Indiana, Edey had 33 points in 32 minutes, 18 rebounds, and 3 blocks. He's the National Player of the Year. There's not even a question about it. Zach Edey has been phenomenal. He deserves it. He's the best player. Even Trayce Jackson-Davis said it in his post-game press conference or his post-game sideline comments. Zach Edey, remember for March, no matter what happens to Purdue between now and then, as long as Zach Edey is healthy, Purdue can make it to that Final Four round. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. And make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, and sign up for the free newsletter. That newsletter comes out every Friday morning with all of our game notes and gambling trends for the college basketball, NBA, football, all the action that goes down on the weekend. So this weekend, we'll be covering the Super Bowl, whether it's player prop bets, game totals, or a game pick. You'll find that in our newsletter, so make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, and sign up for that free newsletter and check out all of our content there. We post blogs every single day. Finally, before we close up, I just want to give a bit of a preview. We will be talking some baseball later this week, so make sure you join us on Wednesday as we have our baseball show, Talking Baseball, on YouTube at Butt Fumble Sports, our YouTube channel, Butt Fumble Sports. In that preview show, we'll be talking about MLB pitchers and catchers reporting. I know we're already getting close to spring training. Also, we'll talk about the World Baseball Classic, which teams to look for, which bets to make, and which rosters really stand out. And finally, we will be talking some fantasy baseball prep in the final few weeks before we have our drafts. That's coming up Wednesday, our Butt Fumble Sports Talking Baseball show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Tomorrow night, on Tuesday, you can find Butt Fumble Sports Talking Football, our weekly NFL show on Twitter Spaces and on YouTube. That starts at 7 p.m., so make sure you're following us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. Appreciate all of you joining us. Okay, we've been doing a lot of just talking. Now let's go through some of the chats here. Let's see what some of you guys have been saying. Appreciate you guys giving gifts and you guys supporting us as we've just been talking sports for the last 40 minutes. So Fox Batone mentions, watch out for the Kentucky Wildcats. I think that's right. They got off to a bit of a slow start. I think the Wildcats will ultimately be a tougher team come the tournament. I don't think they're going to have any, challenge. I don't think they're going to be a competitive team in the SEC championship tournament. I think that ultimately Tennessee is going to win the SEC championship tournament. But that said, I do think the Kentucky Wildcats are a team to look out for come March. I think they're going to make it to the second round of the tournament. So Myers Trading asks, what's my Super Bowl pick? I like the Eagles on the money line. I like Eagles to cover -1.5, and I would take under 50.5. Niners all the way. Well, unfortunately for you, we saw how talented the Niners are when they don't have a starting quarterback. You give the 49ers a quarterback, I think the 49ers would absolutely be in the Super Bowl. But given that Brock Purdy got hurt, they didn't have any backup to turn to. Jimmy G, a.k.a. Mr. Glass, wasn't ready to play. The Eagles are the most complete roster remaining in the NFL. It's why I do like the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. Appreciate all of you joining us. One more time, make sure you join us Tuesday as we talk NFL. We'll be on YouTube Live at 7 p.m. That's Butt Fumble Sports on YouTube. We'll also go on TikTok Live right after that. So if you want to talk some Super Bowl picks, whether it's player prop bets, total plays, or game picks, make sure you join us Tuesday night at 7 p.m. as we talk NFL. Appreciate all of you joining us. We'll see you next time.